This week on the Aviators, the Civil Air Patrol shows us how their 60,000 volunteer members are helping in your community. We take a look at the U.S. Air Force's E-3 Sentry.
7 November, go.
And Curtis explores one of the fewer than a dozen airworthy B-17 Flying Fortresses, Sentimental Journey.
Aviators.
With more than 550 single-engine piston aircraft, the Civil Air Patrol has one of the largest general aviation fleets in the world. By combining these aircraft with a force of more than 60,000 entirely volunteer members, the Civil Air Patrol routinely demonstrates how general aviation can give back to the community.
Civil Air Patrol is the auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force. We have three basic missions, those being emergency services, cadet programs, and aerospace education.
Colonel Joe Cabot is the commander of the Oklahoma wing of the Civil Air Patrol.
We are a part of the Air Force in that we conduct missions on their behalf, including search and rescue, damage assessment, disaster relief, and other things that they are not able to do cost effectively on their own.
One of the three main missions of the Civil Air Patrol is to provide cadet programs for young people from 12 to 21 years of age. With a basis in aerospace, the cadets also receive training in a wide variety of subjects, from photography to astronomy. Cadets even participate in search and rescue missions, helping to locate aircraft that may have crashed or gone missing. We were fortunate enough to witness a search and rescue training exercise in Oklahoma City, where the Oklahoma Civil Air Patrol were looking for a downed aircraft.
We'll send out 2 ground teams and an airplane on today's search. The aircraft is going to be Cap 3532. I'll be a mission pilot on it.
Captain Joe Rathard is a pilot with the Civil Air Patrol in Oklahoma.
The objective today was to look for an emergency locator transmitter that had gone off on an airplane, an airplane that we simulated crashed south of Norman, Oklahoma.
Target is to the south of the field, so we've just taken off. We're headed down south, flying over the University of Oklahoma.
In addition to the aircraft, the Civil Air Patrol will also use ground teams, largely consisting of cadets, during search and rescue missions.
Well, usually the ground team is primarily cadets. We have 1 or 2 senior members that are the ground team leader. The rest of the ground team is made up of cadets. And they have radios to talk to airplanes and mission base. And they also have a handheld emergency locator transmitter so that they can fine-tune, once we get them in the area with the airplane, they can fine-tune it with their handheld equipment and walk right up to it.
Our mission base, Cap 3532. Yeah, we have picked up the ELT, we're prosecuting it now.
When it comes to search and rescue, most people may immediately associate with the Coast Guard or perhaps the National Guard. However, the Civil Air Patrol handles 85% of all inland search and rescue missions directed by the Air Force Rescue and Coordination Center. A large reason for this is that the small aircraft the Civil Air Patrol use are very cost-effective when compared to large military assets.
In Civil Air Patrol, our primary aircraft are Cessna 172s and 182s. There are other types used across the nation, but that's what the fleet is primarily comprised of. We can operate those for under $150 an hour, which is a lot more cost-effective than the Air Force, Army, or Coast Guard using a Black Hawk helicopter or a C-130, which can cost thousands of dollars an hour just in fuel.
Hey, you see anything down there? See the aircraft, yeah. Off the wingtip.
Joe and his cadet have spotted an aircraft that they believe the ELT signal is coming from. However, to verify that this is indeed the aircraft whose ELT is going off, they need the ground team.
5008 or 5009, Cap 3532. We have, believe we have located the aircraft with the ELT going off. Can you give us your position? We'll guide you to the aircraft.
Cadet Major Riley Mitchum, who's flying with Joe, was able to obtain his private pilot's license with the help of the Civil Air Patrol.
Without the Civil Air Patrol, I don't know if I would have had a chance to get my private pilot's license. Now I can share that experience with other people, take my parents flying, take my friends flying, and just share the experience of flight, which I think is one of the main factors that I got my license for, is just to share my love for flight with everybody else.
One of the really good opportunities we have through our cadet program is the opportunity to get pilot training at a very reduced cost. We have a National Flight Academy that we actually hold in Shawnee, Oklahoma every summer, and there are a number of them across the nation. And for a very reasonable fee, cadets go to this activity. They're guaranteed 10 hours of flight time, and hopefully they will be able to solo by the end of that. Once they've completed this, they can go back to their wings and they can get flight instruction in Civil Air Patrol aircraft with Civil Air Patrol instructors towards a private pilot license for about half the rate of going to a regular flight school.
With Joe and Riley's guidance, the ground team is able to reach the aircraft, confirm it is indeed the aircraft with the ELT going off, and pull a simulated victim from the downed plane. Luckily in this instance, everything was a simulation. But the constant training and professional development is one of the many reasons pilots like Joe volunteer with the Civil Air Patrol.
I was a crop duster prior to being in Civil Air Patrol. I started working as an engineer, and I didn't fly that much. Civil Air Patrol has given me an opportunity to keep my flying skills up. We have some very professional pilots in the organization that fly for Border Patrol, airlines, the military. So we have very high standards, and it makes me feel good to fly with Civil Air Patrol.
Air Raid, London, 1940. Those were the days when Hitler's bombers swarmed across the English Channel. They came to destroy British resistance before invading a country that had refused to surrender to the Nazi Blitz. But there was no invasion. A handful of fighter planes, vastly outnumbered but never surprised, was always ready for the attacker. As soon as the enemy set out, a strange device known as radar gave warning, and the Spitfires took to the air. It was the German who was taken by surprise, when the RAF, diving unexpectedly upon him, shot him out of the skies and littered the waters of the Channel and the shores of England with his broken, twisted wreckage. England was saved. As Winston Churchill said, never had so many owed so much to so few. That few included the handful of anonymous scientists who had developed radar.
Indeed, much has changed since radar was used during the Battle of Britain to detect incoming aircraft. Radar and other electronic sensors now play a crucial role in the modern Air Force's ability to detect, track, and prosecute an airborne enemy. For more than 35 years, the AWACS deployed on the E-3 Sentry has given the Air Force abilities that early radar engineers could only dream of, in addition to acting as an aerial command and control platform.
AWACS stands for the Airborne Warning and Control System, based on the Boeing 707-320B platform.
Lieutenant Colonel Brent Vanderpool is an E-3 pilot with the 970th Airborne Air Control Squadron at Tinker Air Force Base.
We primarily provide surveillance, reconnaissance, and deep look into whatever airspace we need to look into. We are basically looking for anything flying, be it friendly or adversary. Technicians on the back of the airplane will then identify those targets as best they can, input it into the computer system, and assign it an identification code. And from there, they will learn more about what they can on that airplane. And if it's one of ours, they give it directions and assignments. If it's not, then they'll decide what to do with it from there.
The distinguishing feature that enables the E-3 and its crew to perform this mission is the 30-foot rotating radar dome that sits atop the aircraft.
That is the world's largest flying airborne radar. It takes massive amounts of electricity. One of the things that differentiates the E-3 from other airplanes is it's an electrical monster. We have 4 generators on each engine, and it produces enough electrical power to power a city of about 35,000 people. You can see where the white stripe is up there. That's basically the radar antenna up there where If you've seen radars moving around in the past, that's the part that swims. And then the black stuff around the outside is basically just an aerodynamic fairing for it. And one side is transmit, and one side is receive.
The E-3 is not the only aircraft you'll find in the U.S. inventory with a rotating radar dome on top. However, it is the biggest. The Navy's E-2 Hawkeye is a much smaller aircraft with a much smaller dome and a much smaller crew. As it's based on a passenger airliner, the E-3 can carry a crew of up to 36 people.
Broken down into sections, we have a flight crew and a mission crew. And the flight crew normally consists of 2 pilots, a navigator, and a flight engineer.
In the back with the mission crew setup, we've got a few different sections back here.
Major Matt Weems is a senior director on the E-3 with the 552nd Air Control Wing.
We've got our technicians who actually keep the systems going, making sure that they do what they're supposed to do. All the way communications, computer, radar technicians, making sure everything's working. We have a weapons section that our job is to sit there and talk to the aircraft. We talk to the fighters, we tell them where they need to go. We talk to the tankers, make sure that everybody's getting the gas they need and their refuelings are working. Talk to all the other platforms that are out there. We also have the surveillance section on board who's looking out there at their task areas of responsibility, identifying aircraft, making sure there's nothing that's not supposed to be there flying around, running IDs on everything, so we know who's out there. They're supervised by the air surveillance officer. We also have an electronic combat officer who works with our passive detection system, listening to radars out there, seeing what's flying around. And the mission crew commander is in charge of the entire mission crew, coordinating everything that's happening here, coordinating with higher headquarters, and also working with our flight deck up there to make sure the platform's actually positioned properly to do its job.
The crew on the E-3 really is one of the larger crews, if not the largest, in the modern Air Force. With this many people on board, there needs to be constant communication between the flight deck and the mission crew.
The integration between the mission crew and the flight deck is key to everything that we do. The flight deck is up there making sure that our plane is positioned where it needs to be positioned, and they're working with our mission crew commander to make sure that we put our plane where it needs to be so it has the best look at what we're supposed to be looking at.
A briefing for an E-3 mission involves everybody on board the aircraft and covers not only the flying aspects.
Egress routes are going to be standard today, so the primary exits will be the one shown in red there. We can always use the blues in secondary. If for some reason we ended up in the water, those would be reversed. Mid-air collision avoidance, if you would please, I'd like to make sure everybody listens up on net 1.
But also what the mission crew are being tasked with.
Commander's intent is to destroy the advanced weapons facility, engage any aircraft.
In this case, it's controlling a pair of F-22s who will be engaging enemy aircraft as a training exercise. Just as the early radar used during the Battle of Britain gave the Allies a leg up on the Axis powers, having the E-3, the Air Force is not only able to find the enemy, but then also give command and guidance to friendly assets to take out the enemy.
What I enjoy is you really get to see it's a focal point for everything that goes on with U.S. air power and even that of our allies. It all comes to bear. We're a central hub of all the information that gets passed, and you really get to see the big picture, so to speak, of what is going on wherever we may be operating.
Getting air support to troops who need air support, you got to have command and control, talking to those aircraft, making sure it happens, and making sure the aircraft that are providing that close air support actually have the fuel to remain in the area. Absolutely vital. You have to have command and control. It's what gets the aircraft and the bombs on target on time to keep the bad guys from getting to them.
Hi, I'm Rob Ryder. Just a few short years ago, the typical training airplane was very analog with lots of round gauges. Now, it's common to find a modern cockpit filled with colored screens. The so-called glass cockpits are everywhere. These systems are more reliable and provide an abundance of information. When coupled with a GPS, you can always know where you are and where you're going.
Of the more than 50,000 heavy bombers produced by the United States during World War II, nearly 13,000 were the B-17 Fying Fortress. Today, less than 10 of the venerable B-17s are still flying, including Sentimental Journey, the B-17G belonging to the Mesa, Arizona wing of the Commemorative Air Force. The B-17's mission was to carry out long-range strategic bombing against the Axis powers. And the B-17 performed its mission very well. More than 640,000 pounds of ordnance were dropped from B-17s during the war, more than any other aircraft. Ironically, the original design of the B-17 was for a coastal patrol vessel, not a heavy bomber.
It all started back with the Boeing company in Seattle, back before the war, and in fact, Boeing almost lost its shirt building this airplane.
Laz Tolas is one of the flight load masters on Sentimental Journey.
Why? It was very, very expensive, but they felt that there was a need for a long-range maritime patrol aircraft, and they knew that war was inevitable because of the situation both in the Pacific and certainly in Europe. So they invested heavily, and through Congress and the military, there was a lot of wrangling, and the company almost went under, but a few years later, thank goodness they persevered, because of course this was huge in winning the war, certainly in Europe, and indeed in all theaters of operation.
So this was designed as a maritime coastal airplane, but it was obviously very well suited as a bomber. What was so admirable about it that it was so used during the
Well, in this particular aircraft, what's phenomenal about this, because this is really the first generation of the big airplanes. And it was because of this airplane that the checklist was developed, because it's so complex. Maritime patrol, you're intercepting, you need long range. The military said we need a multi-engine aircraft. Boeing said, why restrict ourselves to 2 engines? They decided to go with 4. Gave it longer legs, great deal of lift capability, uses the big heavy fat wings as opposed to the thinner wings. So it can go long, it can go not too fast but not too slow. Certainly it was as fast as any fighters of the day. But that lift capability gave it a capacity to carry a heck of a lot of weight, especially fuel.
In the European theater, the B-17 primarily operated during daylight hours, flying out of bases in England and delivering their payload to targets in Germany. With its ample armament of defensive guns, a Seattle reporter gave the aircraft the nickname Fying Fortress when it was unveiled. Boeing trademarked the name, which was well suited to the aircraft. Of the 10-man crew, 7 would be expected to operate a .50 caliber machine gun if the aircraft came under attack.
There's a lot of different guns and positions. It looked like a lot of people had multiple jobs. So who was in the airplane, how many people, and what were their jobs?
Starting at the very nose, it's a 10-man crew. Starting at the very beginning over my shoulder here is the bombardier. He manned the Norden bomb site. He also supervised the loading of the bombs. In flight, he'd go back to the bomb bay, arm the bombs, and then he'd be back at the nose position, and he was responsible for this chin turret. So he was both the bomb aimer, the bombardier, also the gunner when needed. So he's here directly behind him, and to his left rear sat the navigator, and of course he did the navigating. So as we jokingly say, he told the pilot where to go. Then that's the forward compartment. Then you crawl underneath and up to literally a flight deck, and there's the pilot and co-pilot, traditional left pilot, right co-pilot. Standing behind them was the crew chief. He doubled as the top turret gunner. So when the fighters appeared, whoop, up he'd pop into that turret, and that would rotate 360 and elevate just about straight up. After him came the bomb bay. Then after the bomb bay compartment comes the radio room. Now, you have to figure today, modern radios, you can do everything with a very small box. In those days, because of the different frequencies, crystals, and so on, they had different sets. So they needed an actual compartment to do it, including Morse code. Because of the ranges that they would operate, you need low frequency to reach out farther. After the radio compartment, which was actually a compartment, then came the ball turret gunner, then the left and right waist gunners, and finally, way back at the end, was the tail gunner. So there's your 10-man crew.
The ball turret gunner is one of the most infamous positions on the B-17. Not exclusive to the B-17, the B-24 also had a Speary ball turret hanging from the belly of the aircraft.
Okay, so here we are with the ball turret, Speary ball turret. Very rugged piece of equipment, and twin .50 caliber machine guns, and the man actually sat in here, because these 2 guns have got to be rotated straight downward, which takes that hatch, moves it up inside the belly of the airplane. You open the hatch, gunner climbs in, they close the hatch. Of course, he hooks up his oxygen and his microphone and his safety clip and his suit heater. They close the hatch on him, give him a tap. He waits a second till the guy who helped him is clear, and then with the controllers above his head, now his knees are right up here. His controllers are here, and he'll move it around 360, 180, everything in between.
So obviously there was a necessity to invent this. What kind of attack were they defending themselves from?
Well, obviously from below. Lancaster was a terrific airplane, but because it had a huge bomb bay along the whole bottom side, didn't have a belly gunner. Guess where they got attacked from the most on night runs? From underneath. And that was their vulnerability. Otherwise, you know, I'm sure that we'd have saved a lot more had they had that, but they couldn't put one in because of the way the bomb bay was situated.
B-17s did not fly into combat alone. 3, or later in the war, 4 B-17s would form up in a V or delta formation called an element. 3 or 4 elements would form a squadron, with the high element forming high and to the right of the lead, and the low element forming low and to the left. Multiple squadrons would form into a group, and by continuing to build in this manner, massive formations of B-17s could be put together to hit a strategic target. And as previously mentioned, hitting the targets was entirely up to the bombardier. In fact, when it came time to line up for a bombing run, the bombardier actually flew the airplane through the bomb site.
When you're sitting in the cockpit, and I'm the pilot right now, I reach down and there's a bar of switches down here. You flip first of all, you preheat your autopilot, you hit those switches. Now the autopilot is flying the aircraft in 2 out of the 3 axes. The bombardier rather, through the Norden site, which is wired all into this, he has a panel over here, he selects all the parameters. He is now controlling the aircraft by turning dials, much like in a modern airliner. To make the airplane go left, right, up, down, you turn dials, you don't necessarily move the controls. So he did that through the bomb site, and of course he's looking through, which is why in the front here that angled plate is there, so that he's looking through that with the sight and bringing the aircraft onto target. To reach over, open the doors, etc., let the bombs go, close the doors, and then he'll get on his radio, okay, back to you. Then the pilot takes control of the aircraft again, they roll off target, go to the rally point, and then carry on their course back home.
While conducting a bombing run, the B-17 was extremely vulnerable, as the aircraft had to fly straight and level. B-17 losses were extremely high during the early stages of the war. Between ground-based flak batteries and the German fighters, B-17 losses could be as high as 25%. But the structure of the B-17 made the aircraft extremely resilient, and many returned to base shot up or with portions of the airframe missing, but still able to bring their crews home safe. Being built later in the war, Sentimental Journey never saw combat in World War II. Following the war, the aircraft made its way into civilian hands and flew thousands of sorties as a water bomber fighting forest fires. In 1978, the aircraft was donated to the Arizona wing of the CAF and has commemorated the aircraft that did see combat ever since.
It is really amazing to think about that 70 years hence, we've got a piece of history we can touch and we can see and we can feel. How important is that to telling the story of what happened in World War II?
It's incredible. That's why we as the Commemorative Air Force exist. And if you look on the patch here, it says 1939 to 45. We are here for 3 reasons. 1, to commemorate that period in time, 1939 to 45. To commemorate the men and women, both on the war front and back at home, who built these, and to bring that history to the public. And lastly, to keep these aircraft flying. And we want to make sure that this history doesn't get lost. That's how this organization began. These were being turned back into pots and pans, the aluminum. And a number of fellows got together and said, we cannot let that happen. We must preserve that history. You can't look at a frying pan and pretend you're seeing a B-17 Flying Fortress. We must preserve this. It's history.
Seasons 1 to 4 of The Aviators are now available on DVD and Blu-ray. For more information on today's segments, visit www.theaviators.tv. From our official home at the Whitman Regional Airport in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, we'll see you next week on The Aviators.